Can I ask how many veterans do we have in the room? Just raise your hand. So a good number of veterans here. That's great. You know, the one thing, none of you set out to be a veteran, right? In other words, when you joined the military, your purpose was not to be eventually a veteran. Right? You know, there's many things that might have brought you to the service in your country. You know, going to jail or going in the Army. In my case, some of you, maybe 9/11 spurred you to patriotism and you joined the Army or you joined one of the services to give back. But whatever motivated you to get to the military, it wasn't to be a veteran. And if you don't seek but is conferred on you by the country who's grateful for the fact that you did stand up at one point and say, I will give the ultimate sacrifice if necessary on behalf of my fellow citizens. And so I think it's very special what it does, how it represents veterans is, I think, in our society. And so I appreciate the chance to be here with SoA, who also represents our Army. And they do critical work to make sure that our citizens, others, many of whom don't join, don't forget what it is to join. I did command the Army's Special Operations Command, about half of the SOCOM inventory, about 70% of the SOCOM operator inventory are Army soldiers, whether they be Rangers, Green Berets, psychological operations, civil affairs, and such. Depending on where the Army end strength is, that's about 7%, 6% of the Army's total strength. And again, it's a part of a beautiful Army story, frankly, that I try to make sure that the guy doesn't forget when we talk about our Army. I basically came across Spirit of America in my role, frankly, as preparing soldiers, and really on the tail end of my time at Central Command as the commander of the Joint the Theater Special Operations Command assigned to CENTCOM. And I got to witness firsthand the good work that they do for the nation, really at that point for my soldiers on the front line. And when you're out in the middle of the problem, you're not really worried about the bureaucracy. You hear about it and you may realize that it encumbers you getting support that you need on occasion. But for the most part, you're really worried about results. And the great thing about Spirit of America is that in the model that Jim Hake has built, it allows us to spring over the bureaucratic hurdles in many cases that really an enormous undertaking like going to war is inherently going to create. And what he's done is he's allowed, through these great young men and women who are here today, putting them on the front lines with our operators, he's able to use them kind of as an antenna that says, hey, they need this right now in order to be successful. And you may have a cursory consideration about, well, can I get this from the Army? Can I get this from someplace else? And more often than not, if you find yourself, the answer is no, Jim's people will reach back into America, into the strength of the country, which is our industrial base, the might of our business world, right? The patriotism of our citizens. And in some way, things happen to miracle themselves on that very front end of the problem alongside my operators, and they've made a big difference. So I ended my career as the commanding general at the U.S. Army Special Operations Command. And my position, so I went from being as a commanding officer of the CENTCOM theater and all the problems that are inherent from Lebanon, Yemen, Iraq, Afghanistan. Okay, pick a garden spot, Iran, we owned it. I went to USASOC, and really my job was to prepare the troops to go support all of the theaters. But it was also, my job was to think about the business that I'm in and try to understand in a contemporary sense what was going on and try to make sure that we were bringing the lessons that we were learning on the real world back into our schoolhouse so that our models were accurate, so that our doctrine was appropriate, and that our way of operating was appropriate. Spirit of America was a part of that calculus. What was different? Why did Spirit of America, why were they able to be so effective? And in our calculus, basically in the analysis that we came to, what we decided was, all of our enemies out there, if you think about the Russians, the Chinese, the Iranians, the North Koreans, they're all governments that have their hands on every single lever of power within that government. In the United States, that's obviously not the case. And hey, you just have to pick up the newspaper and you can see how fractured it is, decision-making is in this country. For all the right reasons, frankly. But one of the things that distinguishes us also is that, unlike those other countries, America's asymmetry is our strength is our people. They fear their people. And you can dress it up any way you want to, but take a look at Tiananmen Square, take a look at the Russian reaction to the color revolutions, take a look at the Iranian reaction to the Green Revolution. They fear their people. That is an asymmetric advantage on the part of the United States. Our disadvantage is that our government doesn't have immediate handle on all of the levers of power. It's this very messy system that we have that gets maybe that thing to the front lines. Okay, that bureaucracy. What Jim's it's a great example of a new form of partnership between society and its military in answering back to those who oppose us that have as their asymmetric advantage the ability to use all the levers of power of their state. Whether it's the Russians that can create RT and can use any type of measure on the spectrum of acceptable to unacceptable, economic power, we in the United States have to figure out some way to be able to respond to their ability to use all of the levers of power. One of those ways is, frankly, an approach that Jim is pioneered here, which is allowing the American people, the strength of the country, our business, to help those that are sitting out on the front lines, dealing with all the complexity that's out there. It fills the gaps that necessarily are created by the big undertaking that is going to war. And so it's great that they have a charter that's working. I think it's absolutely necessary. I think it's absolutely necessary because it represents a new frontier and potentially a new way of thinking about how we actually harness what we have as a capability to counter our threats. And so, again, I want to salute Jim. I'm obviously a big supporter of Spirit of America. And I want to thank all the young folks that have left service and come to work for Jim in this, what I think is a very important undertaking. So, and that's nowhere near what I had in my prepared remarks, but I figured that's good enough to maybe get started. So.